Now, the Palestinian Health Ministry says that at least 26 people have been killed in the occupied West Bank since Israel launched a military operation there a week ago. Israeli forces are targeting what they call terrorist cells with a foothold in the Jenin and Tulkarem refugee camps. Hamas, which carried out the October the 7th terror attacks, says it was behind two reprisals in the West Bank that killed one Israeli soldier and wounded three others.
Sifting through the debris left by a week-long Israeli raid. Raids in the West Bank have been common since the October 7th terror attacks by Hamas, but residents say they haven't seen destruction like this in over 2 decades, with Israeli forces demolishing homes and businesses across the territory. Local authorities say 70% of the streets in the heavily populated Jenin refugee camp were bulldozed. Many residents are now living without electricity or running water, claiming Israel cut off access across the area. Some people lost everything they had.
I have this shop behind me. I have had a barber shop since 1954. I opened it and I made a living from it. They destroyed it today. The goal is they want to destroy the country so that people get tired of the resistance. But we will not get tired of the resistance. The Israeli army has no targets, so they target us. But we will remain, no matter what they do. Gaza has been under bombardment for a year and is still standing now. So we will remain standing. God willing, no matter what they do. Thank God we are strong.
For most of their lives, older Palestinians have witnessed regular raids in the West Bank, which has been under Israeli occupation since 1967. These latest raids are seen as a major escalation. Hundreds of Israeli troops, supported by drones and armored vehicles, stormed several locations in the West Bank beginning on August 28th, targeting what they said were militant strongholds.
We will not let terrorism in the West Bank raise its head. That's the reason we are going from city to city, camp to camp, with excellent intelligence, very good operational capabilities, very strong aerial intelligence support.
Unlike in Gaza, the militant group Hamas has no official foothold in the West Bank. But the Israeli military has carried out frequent operations in the territory it occupies, targeting commanders of Hamas and other militant groups they link to terror attacks in Israel. According to United Nations figures, Israeli forces have killed over 600 Palestinians in the West Bank since October 7th, at the same time that they're fighting a war in Gaza 100 kilometers away.
Myrav Sunshine is a senior analyst at the International Crisis Group and joins me now from Tel Aviv. Welcome to DW. Good to see you again. Now, Israel is claiming that this operation is to combat and eliminate terrorism. Tell us, is that believable?
I mean, I certainly think it is to many Israelis and to the Israeli establishment that is implementing these actions. What we see is not new, and as long as Israel, continues to militarily rule millions of Palestinians who have no rights and no representation, my analysis of it is that resistance and armed attacks and terror, and however you want to call it, will continue. What's really unfortunate, as somebody who sits in Israel, is that what Israel is doing, they may think that it's going to bring security, but I think we know from decades of the situation that it actually only brings further instability and violence to Israelis as well. So unfortunately, I don't think Israel's actions, whether or not they think they are justified, are actually going to achieve the result that Israel wants. And we see the same thing with Gaza. Israel has destroyed Gaza, and Hamas has only become more popular in many places.
I mean, Israel would, of course, say that it's doing everything it can to not let an October the 7th terrorist attack happen again. And I've heard you say in other interviews as well that Israeli incursions into the West Bank, in this case, risk fueling Palestinian resistance rather than quelling it. What would then an effective alternative strategy be?
Well, unfortunately, I don't see that being very practical right now, because after October 7th, Israelis don't see Palestinians at all, or if they do, they see them as the enemy. But ultimately, Israel cannot continue to occupy territory that it conquered in a war in 1967. It cannot continue to rule over people who have no rights. It can't continue to have two separate systems of law in one place in the West Bank. And now what we're seeing in Gaza looks like a reoccupation within Gaza, not just from the outside. This is ultimately not going to bring stability to anyone. So Israel, ideally would stop building settlements, would agree in a negotiated process to withdraw and to try to find the best way to reach a solution, whether it's one state or two state, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, people need to be free and people need to have equal rights.
But just
unfortunately, that's not.
Just coming back to the West Bank, what we were talking about, obviously Israel is saying, the IDF is saying we're going after militant strongholds here. So again, I mean, if they say that they have the evidence, the intelligence, what should they do?
Well, look, we're talking about a military superpower in the Middle East against many Palestinians who have never lived in anything other than a refugee camp under occupation with no political horizon. And all nonviolent acts of resistance over the years, especially in the early 2000s, were never met with Israeli concessions or any kind of willingness to enter a real negotiated process. So Palestinians have been left with no other choice, unfortunately, other than armed resistance. And what Israel does in the West Bank with its military occupation is violent. It is violent in ways even more than armed resistance is. So in that sense, Palestinians can also say that they have the right to do what they do at the same time. So, I mean, the only way for Israel to deal with terror in a legitimate way is first and foremost to stop breaking international law, agree to a negotiated resolution, and then it would have much more legitimacy in specific targeted operations.
Myra Sunshine from the International Crisis Group. We'll have to leave it there, but we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anya.